Hi, everyone. Thank you once again for tuning in and joining me for this episode from the Lessons from the Playroom podcast. I have with me a returned guest to talk about a topic that is actually really important for us to be discussing, and we're going to unpack it a little bit more. I'm alluding to here the world of technology, digital play therapy, the virtual world. We're going to unpack, is that the same? Is that different? But for so many of the children that we work with, this is the landscape that they are immersed in. So I have with me, if you haven't guessed already, who my guest is, I have with me Dr. Jessica Stone. Let me go ahead and reintroduce you. If you are not familiar with Jessica, I also recommend that you go back and you listen to the past podcast that she and I did together. It will be a beautiful sort of adjunct to the conversation that we are going to have today. So Jessica is a licensed psychologist, executive coach, works in private practice setting. She's been a practitioner, professor, presenter, mentor, and author for more than 30 years. She's actually one of the most prolific authors that I know, everyone. Dr. Stone's interest in therapeutic digital tools, specifically using virtual reality, tablets and consoles, and AI, has culminated in clinical mental health use and research for mental health, medical, and crisis settings. She's the co-creator of the Virtual Sandtray app for iPad and the Virtual Sandtray for virtual reality. She's the past chief psychology officer for Ascendant VR, is a member of various boards, serves as an affiliate of the East Carolina University College of Education Neurocognition Science Laboratory. Jess, thank you so much for joining me once again for this conversation.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. And I'm giggling just a little bit because I'm thinking of when we met last. It was the beginning of COVID. It was all the chaos. It was, can you hear me? Do we have a good enough connection? Is this working? Like so many things have changed. Here we are,
Yeah.
not even thinking anything of any of those pieces because we've just been doing this for so long virtually, and the comfort level is amazing. It's just mind-blowing to think of how far we've come in some of these ways.
Yes. Well, agreed. And I think we can use that also to understand the world that children are immersed in too, because this virtual world, if we want to talk about it in that way, or the world of technology, and again, we're going to unpack that here in a second, is their world. I mean, that's their world, whether they're on a phone, whether they are on a computer, whether, I mean, that's just, that is the world that they are so immersed in. And I think that as mental health clinicians, we need to wrap our mind around the fact that that's not going anywhere. And how do we actually embrace it, which as I'm saying that, I'm sure listeners, some of you might like just cringe when I just said that, but so that's why I have you here, Jess, to help us think about this.
Sure.
So yes.
Yes, I mean, you just said a lot of things. We could go in a lot of different directions, but I think the bottom line, the main thing that I want to pull out of that for the moment is that our clients are digital natives.
Mhm.
Digital natives are going into their 30s now. So, like, even if you're seeing some adults, a lot
Mhm.
of the adults we're seeing now are also digital natives. And that's a term that was brought about by Mark Prensky. He's actually written some really amazing things. So that is an author I would suggest people look into. But he coined the term to talk about people for whom their world has always included some digital tools. And so they don't know life without it. And
Mhm.
while we, as clinicians, especially those of us like myself, who have been around for a long time, seasoned, uh, I suppose is a nice way to
we're,
say.
we're aging ourselves a little bit, Jess.
I know. Well, I actually don't know how old you are, so I'm not even going to include you in that, but definitely my age for sure. Is that we often are saying, why would we include
Mhm.
these things in therapy? And younger generations who are digital natives are saying, why wouldn't we?
Yeah.
Because part of our lives. And so we have this in some situations, we have this disconnect that is happening. And if we back away from the digital portion of it, if we just think about having a disconnect in our lives and our understanding of our clients' lives, that to me is a fundamental concern.
Mhm.
So, what do we do about that? And the fact that the digital we could talk about, myself included, we could talk about the pros and the cons. There are definitely cons. There are concerns. There are things like we can, oh, remember when? Remember, I remember when we didn't have answering machines. Like,
Mhm.
remember when you just weren't available?
Remember when no one knew where you were and couldn't track you, and you just were home when it started to get dark? Do you remember that? Yes.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. Like we can be nostalgic, we can remember those things, we can miss things, we can all of it. Yes, we can have all of those conversations. I'm
Mhm.
not sitting here saying everything about all of this stuff is rosy and, butterflies and unicorns, but and it's not
Mhm.
going away. As a matter of fact, we're going further and further in that direction. And we have clients who are digital natives who don't understand why we wouldn't include these things. And we have our own growth. That's one of the things that's so fantastic about this field is that we continue to grow throughout our careers.
Yeah.
And some of that is a little more painful than others when it doesn't align with who we are and how we are in the world. But I would say it's not about us.
Right. Well, and then that dissonance that happens inside the clinician because the digital space isn't comfortable for them. So how does then the clinician join or facilitate therapy when it feels foreign to them to be in that landscape? Like I don't know how to be in that. It feels so foreign. Right.
Absolutely. And that's why when I was formulating what I thought were the components critical to digital play therapy, there's capability, there's competence, there's congruence. And a lot of things in there has to do with learning more, doing more within it, understanding it. What are the themes? What are the things we can do with it? What are the limits to it? All of those kinds of things. And also it's a lot of work within ourselves. Where are our own lines? Where are the areas where we can learn and we can adapt and we can grow? And where are the places where it's like, that is just not going to work for me? That is not congruent for me. And we can extend that well out of digital anything. And we can talk about even some things that will come up. We may not want to work with certain populations. How do we manage that? Typically, we either figure out how we can ethically and appropriately, or we refer them out because we understand that that's outside of our bounds. And so I feel like there are a lot of parallels in this work too.
So for the listeners, we're talking about the the digital space. Can we unpack, like, what are we talking about?
Really good question.
Like,
I think there's a lot of confusion in that. And what I can share with you is what I have come to in being in this space for a long time. That doesn't mean that someone else won't define it differently and just add to the confusion, but I'll try to be as clear as I can, which is one of the number one things that I hear people confusing, confabulating, all the things is virtual, like in the play therapy space, particularly virtual play therapy and digital play therapy. And virtual play therapy, and not just by my definition, there are articles out there and everything. Virtual play therapy is really surrounding the platform. So whether you use Zoom or any of the other companies, it is that we are meeting with each other through this virtual platform. We could be doing any number of activities. We could be doing drawing, like paper, pencil, crayon, whatever kind of drawing. We could be doing a virtual something. We could be scavenger hunt, like all the things that people do. It could be that the clinician has sent a little care package with, some items in it for us to interact with. But all of that is done through a virtual platform. We are not in the same physical space. And that is really the bottom line of what defines the virtual. The digital really has more to do with the tools that you're using and that they are digital in nature. And that encompasses all kinds of things as you were reading my bio. Like it's 2D, which is like your mobile devices, your tablets, your phones, things like that. It's web-based, which would be on your computer when you're actually typing in, a web address and using it there. Steam, consoles, handheld, Nintendo, Xbox, like VR, any of those kinds of things. So digital tools, and that can be in the same physical space or it can be virtual.
Yes. I love that distinction. That was so beautiful. Because I think I want to circle back to what you were talking about in terms of skill set. And now you're really getting into a nuanced skill set, because there's the skill set of virtual,
Mhm.
but then there's also a skill set related to each digital tool as well. So as I'm hearing this, just please correct me if I'm not hearing this correctly, but the way I'm interpreting this, it would be similar for a play therapist to say, okay, so there is a unique skill set for sand tray work. There's a unique skill set for artwork. There's a unique skill set for an EMDR process, right? All these, and in each one of these sort of tools within the therapy space requires its own skill set. My experience with digital tools is that some of them are vastly different than others and require different skill sets and different understandings in order to engage with the different tools. And then also being in person, there's a skill set, and being virtual, there's a different skill set. So am I understanding that correctly as you're saying that?
Yes. And
Yep.
I think underarching is so not overarching, but under fundamental underneath is that you bring your theoretical foundation, your belief about how change happens, about the process of the therapeutic interaction, engagement, and relationship, and you bring that to any of these things. So whether you're in the same physical space, you're doing it virtually, or or incorporating any of the skill sets that you just listed, not just digital, but any of those, you're still bringing yourself as a clinician to all of that. So the way you're looking at these interactions that are happening with your client really would be pretty darn consistent through all of those different ways. With digital, the skill set and the differences that you talked about for me fall much more under the hardware
Mhm.
differences. So the hardware is the actual unit that you're using. Like I just listed off a whole bunch of different units that you could use. But the programs themselves, there are millions of them out there.
Yeah.
So nobody knows all of them. Like it's just
Right.
crazy. They're coming out every day, hundreds, if not thousands, of new things coming out. So as a whole, if we just talk about the programs and we can put slash games, they're not all games. So I want to say programs, but I know we typically say games. So if we look at those, I would say there's such a bridge between what we do traditionally in play therapy, the themes we're looking at, the the different components that we pay attention to. How did those two characters or organisms or whatever, how did they interact or they didn't? What is the emotional content? What is the interactional content? What's the narration or not? Like what's being created or not? How is it being approached? The frustration tolerance, all those therapeutic powers of play that we talk about all the time from Schaefer, like all of those pieces, That is the stuff that we're looking at attending to in the software portion of the digital. The hardware is more like, which button do I push? How do I make my character move? Like those kinds of things, I think, fall more into the skill set, whereas the software is much more the skill set we already have as play therapists.
So, uh, just as you're describing it, and you're, you know, really this beautiful understanding of, um, really another entry point. That's what I'm hearing. Another entry point to join the child in a way that's deeply meaningful for them.
Yeah.
And why do you think the play therapy field as a whole, and even individual theories, has not um, adopted or embraced the idea of digital? Why do you think that there aren't, because there really aren't there, you don't hear a lot of training, you don't see a lot of trainings going on, even different theories of how would this theory look through, their lens at interacting in this space. Like, what do you think's happening for us as play therapists?
Well, first I'll say I think the theoretical foundation and approach that has adapted, and included digital the most is Adlerian. And so if people do want to look into something that is a little bit more established in this realm, that would be a great place to start. I've had amazing conversations with Dr. Terry Cotman about that, and I know she incorporates it into the work. So there's that piece. But as far as the rest of your question, so my brain really goes into two main categories of the why there hasn't been a wider adoption. And the first and foremost that I see is that even though we don't take the Hippocratic oath, we live by that. We don't want to do any harm. We want to
Mhm.
do best by our clients. And so if there is something that we even might think there is some value in, or we're not sure, or whatever, we want to know that there is solid evidence, reason, experience, foundation, structure, all the things to what we're going to use. And so I think that's a big part is we don't want to do any harm. And I respect that wholeheartedly. And I think that's why I talk about we need to be capable, we need to be competent, etc. So I think that's a big piece. And then the other big piece that I think is it comes into this is it can be overwhelming. I just listed a whole bunch of hardware options. Like, if you don't know how to use any of those, I talk to people, play therapists who don't know how to get their photos off their phone. Can you imagine being like, here's this complicated unit with all these buttons and all these directionals you have to understand in order to even do the most basic things? I think that it can be very overwhelming in terms of their own comfort with the use. And then there are so many different programs to choose from and so many directions you can go in, like, and the trends, right, that our clients bring in. We've all heard of Fortnite, most likely. Like for a while there, everything was Fortnite, and then everything, like it just goes in Roblox. That one's still around in a big way. Not that Fortnite isn't, but like we have these trends. So that's the other thing. Once we feel like, oh, I've got this one down, like I get this another one.
Yeah.
um, for me, that can throw me a little bit too. It's like, oh, I haven't heard of that game, and now every single client's coming in and talking about it, and now I have learning to do. The great thing is I can watch YouTube videos before I even try to play it. I'm like, oh, what is this about? I really try to think through what is the meaning this has to my client. So there are things that I bring in, and there are things that the client brings in. And so the things that the client brings in, what does it mean to them? Why are they drawn to this? What is their role in it? If it's a team, what's their role in that team? what should they get out of being part of that team? What type of gameplay is it? And what are they attracted to? They really like to figure things out, like part to whole or step by step, like multi-sequential tasking, and they're just love that. They just think that that's the most fun thing, and then reaching these goals, which are often side quests or main quests, like those are things I've been paying attention to, and I'm sure all of we us have been paying attention to in children's play
Mhm,
throughout my entire 30 plus year career.
mhm.
We were just applying it in different ways, but I'm bringing it in to figure out, what does this mean to my client? If it's something I'm bringing in, like I'm suggesting maybe this would be a good thing to play, or I even just have it available to play, I have vetted that. I have gone through a process of watching it, playing it, analyzing it to try to figure out, what do I think is the therapeutic value
Yeah.
that this brings.
It's interesting when I was sharing for me this idea of a skill set
Mhm.
related for me, there's the hardware piece, but another component is what you're touching on is that there's you know, each game, if you want to say game, or you were saying program, there's there are themes, there's sort of themes in it. There's they even each have their limitations
Yeah.
also and what they're able to do. And again, not in terms of the hardware piece, but just in terms of the journey or what it can bring up. And so I love that you name that because that for me is one of the most curious parts is the what about this is so interesting for the client? What about this is reflecting their inner world?
Yes.
What about this has such a high resonance for them that they are immersing themselves in it because it's just that interesting to them? Is it an emotional component? Like I said, is it there's an interesting intellectual component it's feeding their intellectual curiosity and I find that completely fascinating when you start looking at the different, just the different opportunities and the different things that kids bring in and that they're interested in. Yes.
I agree. And one of the places that I find happens often and is fascinating for me is when there is an incongruence between their day-to-day way they are in the world and way they manage themselves in the world, a discrepancy between that and how they manage things in whatever program. It doesn't matter which program it is.
Mhm.
A like, just a low-hanging fruit kind of example is that they are quiet. They don't really interact with a lot of people in their day-to-day life. They don't really put themselves out there. They're not trying to achieve or figure things out in any overt way. And then they go into a program and they are killing it. They've got it figured out. They have their parents are like, they can't remember anything. And yet they go in and they know exactly where every single thing on that map is. I
Yeah.
played the game 100 times. I did not know that thing was there.
Yeah.
I had no idea, right? So what is that?
Yeah.
Why in this environment can they be in such a different way
Mhm.
and conduct themselves?
Mhm.
It can translate into self-esteem and how they feel about who they are and what they can do and all of that. Why in this environment is that so different than this environment? And I was taught so long ago, and I imagine we all have been, is that when you have different environments that are eliciting different components, whatever they are, behaviors, all the things, that's an important thing to understand more about because let's say in this example I just gave, if one of the things that we want to work toward in our treatment goal is that this child can exhibit those things in their day-to-day life, if we can uncover and discover what unlocks that in this environment and then understand those components enough where we can translate into other environments, that could be huge for this client and their family and, all the ripple effect.
Yeah. I'm curious, how do you work with parents and caregivers who have a judgment or are bringing their child into therapy and there's a judgment
Yeah.
about their child's interest
Yeah.
in the digital world? How do you work with that?
So I will say firstly that I will acknowledge that most likely a portion of my clients, a portion of the people who come to see me, they are coming to me because I do this. So there's probably a percentage higher of the people who come to me that already are comfortable with it because
Mhm,
that's how they got to me.
mhm,
But that doesn't mean all of my clients. So I definitely have had people, caregivers, family members, parents, whatever it might be, who have come in with really strong feelings and opinions about it. And so it first off, my I have I have the traditional items, whether we're doing virtual work or we're doing in the same physical space. I stay away from in person because we're still like even now we're virtual, but we're still two people and we're still in person. So I have a problem with that term. So
mhm.
that's why I keep saying in the same physical space because that's more accurate for me.
Yeah.
But whichever is the platform, I have all kinds of things available that we can do. I don't only do digital therapy. It's one of the things that is available to my clients. So we aren't by definition always going to be doing something virtual. I mean, well, virtual or even digital. But when I feel like there is a therapeutic purpose specifically to do with digital, and that could be this is your child's world. If I'm to understand why they're utilizing whatever so much, like they're out of balance, or this is a constant struggle in your family, if I'm to understand that, I need to enter that world with them so that I can understand what it means to them. And I have an example for that I'll give. And I know we're getting close on time, so I'll try to be fast. But the importance of entering into that so you can really understand what that means for them cannot be downplayed. Then the other side is that maybe it isn't that I have strong opinions on whether or not digital should be included, but it really is the client's world. And so for me to engage with them, it's an important component. So the example that goes along with that is I liken it to, and this may feel a little bit extreme, but I think it helps to highlight it, is that if somebody came in and they wanted to explore sexuality, but that wasn't my experience, and really that wasn't whatever they were exploring really wasn't something that I was inclined to or even maybe even comfortable with. If I didn't feel comfortable talking about that to a point that I thought we would not be able to do the work, I need to refer them to somebody who is comfortable with that. If I can step outside of myself and ethically and responsibly engage in this, even though it's not my thing, then we can go forward in the work. But if we decide, no, we're not going to talk about that, we are excluding an entire component of that person's life in a place where they should, I don't even use that word very often, but in this case, I'm going to use it, where they should be able to come in and talk about whatever they need to talk about in whatever way they need to talk about it so that they can process through and meet their goals. So I liken it to that. If we have clients who come in and this is a big portion of their world, particularly children who often are faced with adults who are like, that's not real. Those aren't your real friends. That's not important. All those things, that's a whole portion of their life that is getting excluded. And now guess what? They don't have any guidance. They don't have ways to work through and process if they had a difficult situation or things like that because they bring it up and it's like, oh, you can't play that game anymore. You can't do that thing anymore. When really it was, how about we look at that as a way to navigate so many social skills so
Yeah.
many problem solving skills, critical thinking. Like that's the stuff we do in play therapy. Perfect, perfect opportunities. In the other realm, I'll give the quick example of a client who and a teenager who's in our area. We have a lot of people who work in the oil field, and in the oil field, stereotypically, it's not always the father, but often it's the father is gone for long periods of time. So you have a lot of families that are essentially single mom families, even though they're married and there is a husband out there. But they're doing all the day to day, they're doing all this stuff on their own. So in this family, that was the case. The father was gone for long periods of time. There was this teenager and there was a 3-year-old. And mom worked. So mom would come home from work. The 3-year-old's hanging on her leg. She's trying to make dinner. Most of us know the scene of trying to manage all of that. And the teenager would be sitting at the table doing his homework. And he's hearing the kids screaming, and he's got some sensitivity to like all the noises and all the things that are happening. And so he started to go down to his room. He goes down to and he's not interacting like in the kitchen. His mom's like, doing all the things, and he's basically isolated at the kitchen table doing his thing, nobody really interacting with him. He goes downstairs. He's a good student. He gets his homework done. After he gets his homework done, he gets on a game. He's part of a team. It's about the same time every day that he's playing because he got home, he did his homework, now he's playing. And guess what? Those kids on that team are asking him, how's your day? How was that math test you had? But what's happening in your life? How you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Just did you talk to that person you have interest in? Like all kinds of things. That's not happening at the kitchen table. So it's not just about the game. There can be so much more to it. And when I worked with the family to try to balance that out, like, hey, your kid feels ignored and not part of things and excluded and all that kind of stuff, and balanced out the time that was spent, guess what? The time on the computer and in the game went down. But it wasn't because the game was evil or all the things. It was because he had needs that weren't being met.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. I actually have two questions before we
Sure.
wrap this up. Um, do you invite the parents and caregivers to jump into the world too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it depends, if it's therapeutically appropriate and what we're working on and all that kind of stuff. But there are some programs that are just so beautiful for that. Like there's one called Don't Starve Together
Mhm.
that you can put it in endless mode. So if someone, messes up or whatever, they just respawn and they can keep playing. And you're working together, guess what, to not starve. Uh
Mhm.
and the way that families can come in and as a therapist, seeing the dynamic between them and how they come together or they don't, how they work together or they don't, that's really powerful. That turns into more like family therapy. But there are plenty of times when it's still individual therapy, but I'll invite the parent in so they can see what it is I'm talking about, particularly in VR, and particularly if someone has never been in a VR headset. It's like you just can't explain it. You have to put the headset on to even understand it. So, uh, I'll have parents. I'm thinking of one in particular, really perfectionistic kid and all these things, and I'm like, I think these experiences would be really, really powerful for her to do. The parents like, I don't really get it. Put the headset on, put her in the program, and she was like, oh, now I totally get what you were talking. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So my last question.
Sure.
Let's talk about AI for a second.
Yes.
Yes.
For a second.
Probably just 1 second, probably more than a second. When you think about AI in the realm of play therapy,
Yeah.
where's your mind go?
So I've actually done trainings on this. I've written an article on it. Overarching, so before we were underarching, overarching now, we want to envelop all of this, any thought we have, anything in confidentiality is paramount. You're
Mhm.
putting, if you're doing anything in a, I'm going to call it a public, uh, large language model. So throwing all stuff out here, but an LLM, if you see that, it's large language model. And that's basically like the database that I'm just going to use ChatGPT. There's a lot of other ones, but I'm just going to do that because it's low hanging fruit and people have heard of it.
Yeah.
hello, um, is that when you put stuff in there, it's going out into the abyss. So you're not going to use anything, no personal health information, no identifiable information, no nothing, period. Like
Yeah.
that's just in everything. But given that, as a play therapist, the things that I have had the most success with are using image generators to have a client create a prompt, which is essentially turns into a projective. So they're telling me the mood, the colors, the details, like all that kind of stuff. I don't really, I mean, I care, but I don't really care what the image is that's generated. I'm so fascinated by the prompt that they've even created. What did they include? Then when the image comes out and they're like, that's not quite right. The person's not sad enough, or they're too sad, or it's too dark, or it's whatever, telling me so much more information. So that's just like a snippet. Then there's storytelling. I don't know about you, but I have definitely over my career, well before anything digital, I've used narrative play therapy over
Yep.
and over and over again, both in things that are already written and also things that we've written together. So this way, I don't know if you had this when you were a kid, but I remember when the books came out that they would like put your name in and you open it up and it's like, oh my God, it says Jessica, that's me, you know? And it was a big deal. Well, in generative AI storytelling, you can create stories that can have details in it that you want. And you can have a very similar experience of like, oh my gosh, that's about me, or that's me, or, whatever. You have to be careful about those identifiable components. But it still stands that it's really powerful. And then lastly, learning, especially with some older kids, like middle school and up, sometimes any of us, we think that we are coming across a certain way and other people don't perceive us in the way that we think we're coming across. So I've used generative AI to say, okay, what might something typically, how would you interact with somebody or something that you would typically say? And verbatim, right? And we type it in and ask ChatGPT or whichever other one you use to analyze the tone and how it might come across. And a lot of times it gives the feedback that's different than how the person thinks that it's coming across. And then it's like, oh, then we play with it. How do we tweak it? If we say this instead of that, how does it come across? And we play with it to the point that then they can start to see where that discrepancy is. And then we talk about AI in like an administrative kind of way. I've used it when I can't think of an intervention. If I'm like, okay, I've used these interventions all these times, what might I be missing? What else could I do? Or what activity might we do? Or something like that. And some of them I don't like at all, but there are gems that come out and I'm like, wow, I hadn't even thought of that. So it expands for me a lot of those kinds of things. And then there's just like letter writing that I leave out the personal information, but it's like, boom, wow, that's a really impressive letter. I probably would have taken a really long time to come up with that. Uh, so, it saves time there. Then there are other times when it actually makes things take longer. So it's not always about saving time, but it can be more expansive. Like I'll be writing something and I'll give it a list. I have all these components that I'm going to include in this project I'm doing. What might I be missing? And then it says, oh, this, that, or the other thing. And some of them I just toss out. That's silly. And then other ones, there I go down the rabbit hole.
You're down the rabbit hole, exactly. And an hour later.
Hour later, I'm like, wow, there really was value to that. I've never even heard of that concept before. So if you're
Yeah.
ever reading something I've written and you're like, where the hell did she pull that out of? It might be because I went down that rabbit hole and I was like, wow, there really is value. I had no idea that that was out there. So for me, it's like how it can expand and then how we can use it in these projective ways that can be really powerful. So that's the nutshell.
Yep. So, Jess, I don't know if you have come across this or not, uh, but I'm thinking of this specifically in terms of our teenage clients that we work with. But I read an article that one of the number one uses globally
Yeah.
for AI ChatGPT is therapy,
Yeah.
is therapy and just support and all of that. And so
Okay, I'm going to air quote the therapy on
yeah,
that.
yeah, we're definitely gonna air quote therapy. Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah,
I think that's interesting also to bring into the therapy conversation with particularly with our teen clients. Are they
agreed.
using it? How are they using it? What kind of information are they getting? How to because I mean, we just know there's a high number of kids that are turning to ChatGPT or other trying to get relationship advice or trying to sort through life situations and circumstances. And I think it's important for play therapists to be aware that that's happening because they may not be aware that it's being used at that level for that. And actually, it's one of the number one things globally.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the crisis that we have that we all talk about all the time of how, we have more need than there is
Yeah.
uh, care, good care, all that. So that is absolutely, and I think it speaks to a really much bigger
Yeah.
global concern of us not getting our mental health needs met.
Mhm.
And then we think of how do we have those conversations? And I agree with you that opening that conversation up, do you use it for that? What is that like? What's your experience been? And the most common thing that I hear, I know we read about these horror stories of like this awful advice or dangerous stuff even that can happen. I would say that that's going to happen less with certain programs, and I can't list all of them because I don't know the parameters of all of them, but I do know in ChatGPT that there are things that it will not talk to you about. It will not allow. There are parameters that are put in. Am I saying they're perfect? No, but I'm saying there are things there. So part of it does also depend on the program that the person is using, um, whether or not you're going to get a dangerous, like awful
Yeah.
scary stuff zone. But if we're in just air quotes, just the like interaction, usually the thing that I hear number one is that it feels good for a short amount of time because you say something and usually the ChatGPT is back and it's like, oh, something really like nice about
Totally. That
you.
was a great question. Oh,
Exactly.
you're so insightful. You're yes.
Right. And it stays in that zone. And so at some point you're like, but I'm not perfect. This isn't like,
Yeah.
would you ever give me any like constructive criticism or anything? And
Right.
it sort of falls flat after a while because it doesn't feel real because nobody's going to just keep coming at you with that was so great and that was so insightful. But I've put like even a sentence in that I like, what about this sentence? How could I change it? And we do. And then I put in the final sentence and it was like, that's a great sentence. And I'm like, oh, that felt good. And then I'm thinking, but is it? Because I'm not sure you would tell me if it wasn't.
Exactly.
So, it falls flat at some point, but I think it speaks to us. Like if our clients are using that, if
Mhm.
they're using it a lot,
Mhm.
what do they need in that? And
Yeah.
and and
What are we getting out
how
of it?
are they not getting that positive in
Yeah.
their life? And how might we get it somewhere else?
It's sort of similar to the situation you shared with the boy that would leave the kitchen table and go downstairs and the curiosity of how what need was being met there that wasn't being met at the kitchen table. Uh, Great. So what need is ChatGPT meeting that is not being met in some other way or through other relationship or whatever? Yeah.
And to me, that's the crux
Yeah.
in all of this.
Yeah.
What are the needs that are being sought, that are being met, that aren't being met? What are the we're drawn to things for a reason. They connect with us for a reason.
Yeah.
And understanding what that is, that's where
Yeah.
the power and that's where the therapy happens,
So
whether it's
beautiful.
digital or it's not.
Beautiful. Jess, for individuals that want to hear more about your work, that want to know when you do trainings, if you'll do a training, all of the different things, your how many books have you written or been a part of, just out of curiosity?
46.
Yeah, I was like, exactly. I told you everyone, she's one of those prolific authors that I know. So yeah, 46. How can people find you?
I think the best way is to come to my website, which is just my name, and I'm sure you'll put that kind of stuff on there, but jessicastonephd.com. I will say I am not the greatest at upkeeping all the list of the trainings and all that kind of stuff, but you're welcome to reach out to me and ask me, what's coming up. And I'm super happy to interact with people in that way. And so that's probably the very best. I have a Twitch stream that I do with Michael Ehrig. He's a MFT out of California. And we're taking a little hiatus over the summer, but we have recorded episodes already on YouTube. So you could just look up digital play therapy, and then on Twitch. And I'm edging him. I'm talking into, can we turn this into a podcast? Because for some people, Twitch is a foreign, they don't even know what I'm talking about. And so to get it easily on Spotify and whatnot. So that's my goal by the end of the summer, that we'll have, because we've been doing that for almost 5 years. We've been doing that Twitch stream, and it's a conversation like this. It's essentially a podcast where we're talking about all kinds of things to do with digital play therapy. And I'll lastly say that UNICEF has done 2 amazing studies, and I'm going to say they're reports. They're not studies because it's conglomeration. They did one in 22 and one in 24, and it's called the RITEC study. It's RITEC. So just Google that and UNICEF, and you'll come up with both of them. Really amazing stuff that you can use for yourself to understand, and also when you're talking with any collateral contacts, parents, caregivers, anybody. Some really powerful stuff in there. I strongly recommend it.
So Jess, thank you once again for enlightening conversation, for helping play therapists wrap their mind around this. And one of the things I love that you say every time I speak with you, read something that you write, but you are such an advocate for join the child where it's meaningful for the child. And that's just a message that I hear come out of you in so many different ways, that the where the meaning is the entry point. And just thank you for being a voice for that and for kids and what's important for them. So thank you. Yeah.
Appreciate the conversation.
Yep. All right, everyone, wherever you are in the world, hope this podcast finds you well. Take care of yourself. You are the most important toy in the playroom. Until next time, everyone.